The story of the Tower family, from Waterville to the Kremlin. Anyone passing through the town of Waterville have probably seen this building. Few know its history. Few know the story of the family tower. Reuben Tower Sr. Reuben Tower grew up in the town of Paris near Paris Station, where he met and married Deborah Pierce, who lived nearby on his 21st birthday in 1808. Deborah would bear him Charlemagne, Julius, Henrietta, Fayette Bartholomew, DeWitt Clinton, James Monroe, Francis Marion, and Reuben Jr. The couple moved to Waterville, where Reuben hopefully would start a business as a dry goods salesman in 1809. The business was a failure in 3 years. Reuben was so desperate that he took a job as a substitute soldier, and he went off to the War of 1812 at Sackett's Harbor. There he became a sergeant major in command of a shore battery. And during an attack on Sackett's Harbor on July 19, 1812, he repelled an attack on the harbor from the British fleet. After the war, he took a clerkship and spent 2 years out in the Sackett's Harbor area. When upon his return, he built this house in 1811. The right-hand part of this house is the first structure that he built, and it's in the Federal style. Reuben invested his money in a distillery, and he soon became a successful whiskey baron. His business was selling whiskey all over the state, in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Ohio, and New England. The opening of the Erie Canal in 1825 greatly helped to expand his business, plus allowed a reliable way to get his raw materials. Upon reading his letters, I discovered that he had a steam mill installed in his distillery to grind his ingredients. The millstones he bought were from Alfred Munson in Utica. With the success of the business and the growth of his family, he built an addition to his home. The part on the left is now was part of his home and built in the Greek Revival style. Reuben saw the impact of canals on his business. He soon became a member of the Shenango Canal Committee that was dedicated to building a canal across the southern part of New York to connect the Erie Canal to the areas of the interior. He worked relentlessly to promote it, going as far as accompanying Holmes Hutchinson on his survey of the canal in 1828. He was elected in 1829 to the New York Assembly, and he was an ardent supporter of the canal bill. In his widely distributed pamphlet, Reuben argued in length for the benefits of the canal, and he correctly predicts the depletion of wood supplies and the growing demand for cheap coal, which could only be delivered by the canal. Here's a map of what the canal path looked like, starting in the north in Utica and ending in Binghamton in the south. And all these little towns prospered along this length. There was a lot of opposition to the canal due to the cost of its many canal features, like the lock pictured. There was 116 locks to be built, each at a cost of roughly $1,000 apiece. Also, the canal had no natural water supply, and they didn't think there would be enough tolls to make it worthwhile. The canal would have no natural water supply, so to make it work, 7 artificial reservoirs would have to be built to make it work, like this one in Edenbrook. It's a large wood earthen dam. Unfortunately for Reuben Tower, he never saw the canal become a reality. He died before his beloved canal was built in 1834. Here's an example of the original lock plans and the eventual lock that was built. This one is lock 32 in Deansboro. Reuben contracted TB, and because of his illness, he thought a warmer climate would help his ailments. So he traveled to Florida on horseback. Unfortunately, soon after his arrival, he died in 1832 in Florida. His eldest son would lead the next generation of towers. In my research, I found that the Tower family had donated 2 busts and some wallpaper to the Munson Williams Proctor Institute Museum. Here's the bust of Charlemagne Tower from their collection. Reuben Tower wanted all his children to get the best education possible. Charlemagne was able to attend Harvard. He would finish 3rd in his class. Ahead of him are his 2 friends, Benjamin R. Curtis and Charles Sumner. Curtis became a Supreme Court justice, and Sumner became a U.S. Senator and leader of the anti-slavery movement. Upon graduation from Harvard, he went to learn the law. He read law on Hermanius Bleecker in Albany. In his law schooling, he was sent to Washington to assist in a lawsuit against the French government. There he meets Vice President Martin Van Buren and Andrew Jackson. Unfortunately, when Reuben Tower Sr. died, he had to return home to take care of the family business. Unfortunately, in a few years, Charlemagne and his brother mismanaged the Tower estate and they declared bankruptcy in 1850. Charlemagne returned to the law, and he started his law career in Waterville in this little brick building on the corner of the estate that was used for schooling, because Reuben Tower didn't think that the summer recess should be left for no learning, so he built this building so his kids could learn it. And this is where Charlemagne built his law practice. He was so determined to make money, he would take on any case, and he would travel anywhere just to make some cash. Alfred Munson and Charlemagne conspired together in the Pennsylvania caper. Coal was becoming an important commodity. In the conspiracy, Alfred Munson had Charlemagne Tower go to Pennsylvania to buy up large tracts of land that had coal on it secretly. So they would build a large area for coal mining. So Charlemagne settled in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, where he would settle the land claims. He would make sure that there was no liens on the claims, that no one would interrupt their plans. He would make sure all the sales went through smoothly. And it took him about 20 years to complete that. In the meantime, he married Amelia Malvina Bartle and became a district attorney and made a quite profitable law practice. After the outbreak of hostilities at Fort Sumter on April 12, 1861, Tower recruited 270 Schuylkill countrymen to enter the Union Army for a 3 months enlistment. The unit was called the Tower Guards. They became Company H of the 6th Pennsylvania. Charlemagne was made captain, and he personally paid for all his men's uniforms and weapons. The unit served in one important engagement during the war at Falling Waters in July of 1861. Because the unit was only formed for 3 months, Charlemagne mustered out, and that ended his military career. By 1883, Charlemagne had settled all the land claims, and they sold the land claims to the Reading Railroad for $3 million. And per his agreement with Alfred Munson, he received $1.5 million. Now, most people would be settled with that, but not Charlemagne. He quickly invested in another project, the Northern Pacific Transcontinental Railroad. This railroad would connect the Great Lakes to Puget Sound and Washington. The construction of the Northern Pacific was an expensive enterprise. Tracks were laid all over the western wilderness until it reached Puget Sound. Thankfully, the railroad was completed, and Charlemagne was able to buy up vast land tracts along its route, which he quickly sold to make a profit. Now, Charlemagne, not to be deterred, went on to invest in other projects. One was the iron ore in the Vermilion Iron Range in Minnesota. Prospectors found a mountain of iron ore in what was now called the Vermilion Iron Range. $5,000 people at the iron mines and 2,000 people at two harbors were dependent on operations of the mines and the railroad connecting the Tower businesses. Now the iron mines were 63 miles away from the Great Lakes two harbors port. So he had to build his own railroad to connect it and allow this whole operation to work at his own expense. Thus, the Duluth and Iron Range Railroad was built and allowed the whole operation to work. Now, another brother of Charlemagne was Fayette Bartholomew Tower, who was a civil engineer and author. And it's from his diaries we have an accurate description of the Benjamin Harris inauguration in 1841. Now, he was a civil engineer under John B. Jervis, who was from Rome, New York, and he worked on the Croton Aqueduct from 1837 to 1842. And the Croton Aqueduct was the first water supply to New York City. And upon its completion, he wrote a book calling The Illustrations of the Croton Aqueduct. In it, there was several illustrations which accurately depict the structures that he worked on. Really works of art. Now, his brilliant artwork accurately depicted all the structures of the project, and today it's used as a resource. Now, Fayette's health forced him to retire to Cumberland, Maryland, and where he became a member of the Maryland legislature. He also became mayor of Cumberland. He died in Waterville on February 16, 1857. Another brother was the youngest, Reuben Tower Jr. He was a stock breeder. He was president of the village of Waterville. And he also was supervisor of Sangerfield. He championed many local organizations. Here is his favorite, the Waterville Military Band. Here he sits in the center. Reuben Tower Jr. built his home across from the Tower Mansion. It was built in 1896, and then he built the Tower to connect to his home. Here's a picture of it under construction. This is what the tower looks, pretty much what it looks like today. It was 103 feet tall, had 4 floors, a bell tower, and a clock. In the interior, Reuben Tower Jr. bought a Persian rug for $1,000, and when it wouldn't fit into his house, he had his house enlarged so it would fit. And here's what the carpet looks like today. The interior also boasted of solid oak paneling and doors 3 inches thick. Reuben Towers Jr. was probably the first in the area to have an indoor plumbing. Now this toilet, the original toilet to the building, really caught my eye because it's so intricate and beautiful. The patent on the left-hand side dates it back to 1889 and was cutting-edge technology at the time. A large cistern in the upper floors collected rainwater, which was used to flush the toilet. In the upper reaches of the tower were bell chimes and a keyboard that would allow to play tunes on the bells. The clock was a Seth Thomas clock, and the large mechanism moved the clock faces on the tower, which still work today. Also, Reuben Tower Jr. built a horse barn for his brother Charlemagne, which is now the Tyler Manor Inn and Lodge. The next generation of towers was led by Charlemagne Tower Jr. His father made him president of the Duluth and Iron Railroad, and he managed his father's iron operation. Charlemagne Sr. was now in his 70s, so Charlemagne Jr. took over the reins. Here's a picture of Charlemagne Tower Jr., who spent 5 years in Minnesota managing his father's claims. Charlemagne is on the extreme right. Next to him is his brother-in-law, R.H. Lee, and to his left is his sister, Deborah Tower, who married R.H. Lee. Now, after he retired from the iron business and the railroad, Charlemagne Tower Jr. went west to take a cruise to Alaska. He went on the George W. Elder, which is the ship on the left, and then he transferred to the Olympian when he reached Alaska to patrol the coast. Here he met his future wife, Nellie Smith. Here's a picture of Charlemagne Tower Jr., who went by Charlie to his friends at age 39, and Nellie, age 28. After his marriage to Nellie, Charlemagne Tower Jr. would devote much of his time to history and archaeology. He became a professor in the University of Pennsylvania. He would also publish a book, The Marquis de Lafayette and the American Revolution. His command of several languages, world travel, and education, let alone his wealth, made him an ideal candidate for ambassador. President McKinley selected Charlemagne Tower Jr. as a diplomat to Austria-Hungary in 1897. He became minister to Austria-Hungary. This is where he learned the art of diplomacy, dealing with the Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria from 1897 to 1899. In Austria, Charlemagne Jr. became good friends of Samuel Clemens, who was staying in Vienna while his daughter was learning how to play the piano. They became such good friends and they corresponded quite frequently. And one, Charlemagne Tower Jr. possessed all the qualities necessary for a perfect representative of the United States. Quite a ringing endorsement. Nellie was the perfect ambassador's wife. She loved world travel, and she was an excellent hostess. She entertained many important dignitaries and their families. Theodore Roosevelt took over from McKinley when he was assassinated. He gave Charlemagne the important post to Russia under the new president. The Secretary of State at the time was a family friend, Elihu Root, who lived in Clinton. This is a newspaper depiction of Charlemagne Tower Jr. when he made ambassador to Russia in 1899. Now, the Russian royal family at that time was Nicholas II and Alexandria. On the right is the Romanov family entire. The whole family was murdered during the 1917 communist revolution in Russia. Now, the Russian Tsar did not like the business suits that the Americans wore at court. So Charlemagne Tower Jr. devised his own outfit. He had intricate embroidery on his jacket. He had a feathered hat, and he also wore a sword. And his wife Nellie was dressed to the nines with pearl necklaces and tiaras, just to please the Tsar. You have to understand that the house that he rented in Russia cost $18,000 a year to rent, and his salary was only $12,000 as an ambassador. So much of the Tower fortune was spent being an ambassador. Here's a picture of the boys. From left, it was Roderick, Charlemagne Tower Jr., Jeffrey, and Dominique. In 1902, Charlemagne Tower Jr. was made ambassador to Germany, where he became friends with the Kaiser, William II. This is Charlemagne attending a road race with the Kaiser. Upon his retirement, Charlemagne Tower Jr. returned to Waterville, and he added the third section to the home. Now, the Tower family was impactful on the town of Waterville. In this picture, it shows the dedication of a flagpole, which was 136 feet tall and with a large flag. Also, the park that which it was posted on was donated to the town from the towers. And it would soon become a Civil War park where a large monument to the Civil War soldiers from the area. Now, Charlemagne Tower Jr. was friends with Andrew Carnegie, one of the richest men in the world. Now, Carnegie set up the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in 1911, which was an organization that promoted peace all over the world. And Charlemagne Tower Jr. was the perfect candidate to work for this organization. Now, President Taft and the secret mission. Charlemagne was sent to Germany allegedly by the New York Times on a secret mission to confer with his friend the Kaiser on a hunt. There's been no proof to this, but it would make sense because Charlemagne Tower Jr. was such a friend with the Kaiser. You have to remember at this time things were heating up in Europe and prelude to World War I. The fourth generation tower, the children of Charlemagne Tower Jr. Gertrude was killed in a car wreck caused by a reckless driver in a sports car after leaving a party on May 17, 1916. She was 20 years old. Helen was the oldest sister. And she was a bit of an adventurous. While visiting out in California, she took a ride in a float plane, a Curtiss float plane. This is what it looked like. All these pictures were from a scrapbook of Roderick Tower. Next was Dominique. He was the black sheep of the family. While attending Yale, he secretly wedded Miss Georgiana. And of course, the Towers did not appreciate her or think this was a good match. She sued Charlemagne Tower Jr. for $200,000 for alienation of affection from Dominique. And this made all the big papers. It was such a scandal and an embarrassment for the family. Note on the left, Nellie's picture is huge and Charlemagne Tower Jr. is just a sliver. The wedding was exposed and the couple were divorced. Roderick Tower would become a World War I pilot. He was a flight instructor, and you can see that combat training was not a safe occupation. This is Roderick Tower on the left in this photo. This is a picture of a squadron, group squadron after training. There's another photo of Roderick Tower. He's in the center, one with a man's hand on him. Here's a picture of Roderick Tower with a bunch of guys who were from Harvard. The man with his hand above Roderick is Quinton Roosevelt. This is Teddy Roosevelt's youngest son. This is another photo of Tower and his fellow pilots. Here's his photos of Quinton Roosevelt in France in 1918 as a combat pilot. This is a picture of Flora Payne Whitney, who was Quinton Roosevelt's fiancée. She was a granddaughter of Cornelius Vanderbilt, and the Whitney family was also so wealthy. Here's a picture of Flora Payne Whitney. Picture on the right is a picture that they found in the wallet of Quinton Roosevelt. Flora and Quinton were engaged before he left for Europe during the war. Unfortunately for Quinton, he was shot down by a German aircraft. His picture was taken by his crash scene by the Germans, and this was used as a postcard for propaganda purposes. Now, Roderic was friends with Flora, and he sent many letters to her after Quinton died, and they soon developed a romance. They were married in 1920. Marriage wasn't a happy or lengthy one. The Harris divorces Roderic in 1925, but they have 2 children, Whitney and Pamela. Whitney was a journalist who made a name for himself as a horse racing editor. He was on the ground floor of a fledgling sports magazine in the 50s called Sports Illustrated. Now, his sister Pamela married a Louboutier, and their son John became a member of the Congressional House of Representatives from 1980 to 82. This is a picture of him as a political pundit on Fox network. That is the Tower family from the early 1800s to the 1980. I'd like to thank Robert Taggart, Jim Coulthard, William Getman, the Waterville Masonic Temple, Laura Eric Janello, Mike Supel from Munson Williams Proctor Institute, the Waterville Historical Society, and Kristen Goodwill from the Hampton College Special Collections.